Hi class! Welcome back. Now we are going to have another new lesson on the Psychological Association of the Philippines Code of Ethics. So this time we are going to have part 2. That is the General Ethical Standards and Procedures, specifically on resolving ethical issues. On our previous video, we discussed the principles in the Psychological Association of the Philippines Code of Ethics. In here, we are going to focus now on the general ethical standards and procedures in resolving ethical issues. Now, let's go to the next page. Now, let's define first the general ethical standards and procedures. So in here, as stated by the Psychological Association of the Philippines, we subscribe to the following general ethical standards and procedures as we conduct ourselves in the various aspects of our professional and scholarly activities as psychologists. These general standards and procedures refer to. So in here, the general ethical standards and procedures pertains to the guidelines that the professional, either the registered psychometrician or the registered psychologist, will do if ever situation arises. Now, let's check on the general standards and procedures in the general ethical standards. Okay, so number 1, Roman number 1, how we resolve ethical issues in our professional lives and communities. So we are going to talk about the ways how an individual, a professional, would be suggested to act. Actually, not suggested, but the general standard how an individual should act in their professional lives and communities as guided by the ethical standards. Number 2, how we adhere to the high standards of professional competence. So in here, how we are going to focus on developing our competencies as well. So how ethically how we're going to do that. And third, how we respect for the rights and dignity of our clients, our peers, our students, and our stakeholders in the profession and scientific discipline. So in here, as stated in the principle, one of the principles there is to respect the right and dignity. So in here, as professionals, the guidelines will also mention about how we are going to respect the rights and dignities of our clients, peers, students, stakeholders. Stakeholders are the people, or in other words, can be customers in the profession and in the scientific discipline. Now let's go to the next page. Fourth, how we maintain confidentiality in the important aspects of our professional and scholarly functions. So in here, we are also going to talk about confidentiality. What are the general ethical standards on confidentiality? Fifth, how we ensure truthfulness and accuracy in all our public statement. So in here also, as professions, we should be transparent. We should be truthful and accurate in our statements, specifically if it is public. So in here, with the ethical general standards and procedures, we are going to talk about how to be truthful and accurate if you are in a public figure. So I believe most of traditions right now, what I've noticed is that most of them are engaging in the mental health advocacy, specifically by making YouTube channels and page as well. So in here, how should an individual or a professional should act truthfully and accurately in the public settings as well. And then the sixth, how we observe professionalism in our records and fees. Also, because this is a profession where professionals can earn, so it is very accurate that there are also general and ethical standards to give or ask for professional records and fees. So there are general and ethical standards for that. Now let's start with the first one. So the first one would be the resolving ethical issues. So what can an individual or a professional should do in terms of resolving ethical issues? Now let's go to the letter A. Letter A, misuse of psychologists' works. In instances where misuse or misinterpretation of our work comes to our attention, we take appropriate and reasonable steps to correct or minimize effects of such misuse or misinterpretation. So in here, it focuses on the professional should be mindful by him or herself, that he or she should notice if there are mistakes that he or she have done. So if there are mistakes, because I mean every one of us here are not perfect people, so there would be probably mistakes. So what the professional should do is that he or she should be responsible by taking steps to correct or minimize the effects of the said mistake. So it can be misuse or misinterpretation. So the professional himself or herself should be the first one to correct him or herself. Letter B, conflicts between ethics and law, regulations, or other governing legal authority. In instances where our code of ethics conflicts with the law, regulations, or governing legal authority, our first step is to take appropriate actions to resolve the conflicts while being committed to our code of ethics. So in here, if there are instances that the professional faces a situation wherein the code of ethics or the psychological association code of ethics is in conflict with the existing law, regulations, or governing authority or governing legal authority, the first thing that the professional should do is to resolve the conflict, okay, without disregarding or without disregarding our code of ethics and being committed to our code of ethics. All right. However, if the conflicts cannot be resolved by such means, we adhere to the law, regulations, or governing legal authority. So, our code of ethics in here serves our guidelines, our ethical standards, and as being or to be a professional. So in here, if ever that the code of ethics is still in conflict with the law or regulations or any governing legal authority, the last thing that we should do as professional is adhere to the law. So don't debate about it, okay? Because we have lawyers, attorneys who are actually specializing in law, so they know the law itself, okay? So in here, our code of ethics serves as our ethical guidelines, our general standards in practicing as a registered psychometrician or a registered psychologist in the future. So on top of our code of ethics, we have the law. Okay, so that's the law of the country. Okay, so it is studied and very much proven as well. So it is better to, if ever the conflict cannot or can no longer be resolved, the best thing to do to the professional would adhering or would adhere to the law stuff. All right. Okay, letter C, conflicts between ethics and organizational demands. In instances where a code of ethics conflict with organizational demands, we make our code of ethics known to the organization. We also declare our commitment and adherence to this code when resolving the conflicts. So, for example, you are already a registered psychometrician and you are going to work in an organization, and your role would be a registered, or your role would be the psychometrician of the organization. So, if ever there are conflicts between the code of ethics, or the rules and regulations of the organization that is in conflict with the psychological association code of ethics, what we should do as professional is make our code of ethics known. Okay, we have to declare it, and we have to to tell them that this is what we do and this is how we practice it. Okay, and this is our general ethical standards. Okay, so that's the thing, that's the first thing that we should do. Okay, so if ever in the future that arises, the first thing that the professional should do is make the code of ethics of the PAP known. Letter T. Informal resolution of ethical violations. When we become aware that another psychologist violated our code of ethics, we may resolve the issue by bringing it to the attention of the psychologist. We do so if the informal resolution is sufficient and if the intervention does not violate confidentiality rights. Okay, so in the future, there would be a lot of professionals. Okay, so just like you in the future. So if you're a registered psychologist, you would probably have friends or coworkers who are registered psychologists or psychometricians. So if ever in the future you've noticed that your coworker, that who is also a professional, violated the code of ethics, the first thing you should do as a professional is that you should notify the person the code of ethics that he or she violated without, of course, being offending or without be sounding offensive, rather. Okay, so that's the first thing that you should do. But there's a but there. So if you know, or if you've noticed that there is an ethical violation uh, done by a fellow professional, and you wanted to point it out, make sure that you yourself has protected the confidentiality of the stakeholder or the client where the violation has been done. Okay, so all right, so again, just to make clear, an individual or a professional should bring to the attention of the other psychologist or psychometrician who violated the code of ethics. He or she should bring that, or let the person know about the violation without violating confidentiality. Okay, confidentiality pertains to making the information between the client and therapist secret or held or stored. Okay, so make sure that there should not be any confidentiality being bridged there. All right. Letter E. Reporting ethical violations. Number 1. If there is likely to have substantial harm to a person or organization, we take further action to report violation of the Code of Ethics to appropriate institutional authorities. So in here, if there is a harm to the person or the organization that the psychologist is giving service to, so the thing that we should do is to report the violation of the code to the respective office, okay, where it should be reported. So here in the Philippines, the Psychological Association of the Philippines have divided certain offices where individuals can reach to if ever problems arises. So in this case, the ethics states that if you are going to report a violation, you have to make sure that you are reporting to the appropriate office. Okay, so that's actually the main G's of this um, number one, or the bullet number one. Number two, however, this does not apply when an intervention would violate confidentiality rights, or when we are called to review the work of another psychologist whose professional conduct is in question. Again, in here, in simple terms, this is not possible. Reporting an ethical violation is not possible if there is if there is um, if there is a violation of keeping confidentiality. Again, confidentiality is one of our course, its principles. So we have to keep confidentiality. So if you're going to report a violation, make sure that there is no confidentiality being breached. Letter F. Cooperating with Ethics Committee. We cooperate with the ethics investigation, proceedings, and requirements of any psychological association we belong to. So in here, you clinicians are, I believe, are members of the Junior Psychological Association of the Philippines. So if there are requirements that are needed to be passed, just to uh, just to make sure that ethical conditions are still being continued, you as a person, you as a part of the organization, whether or not you are registered or not yet registered psychologist or psychometrician, you should cooperate with the ethics committee. Letter G. Improper complaints. We refrain from filing ethical complaints with reckless disregard or willful ignorance of facts that would disprove allegations of ethical violations. We also refrain from filing complaints without supporting factual evidence. So in here it states that we should refrain from improper complaints. Improper complaints entails that these are reckless disregard rather, and that is actually just filled with ignorance. Okay, so if you're going to report a complaint, we should back ourselves with facts. Again, without violating confidentiality, we should back ourselves with facts. All right, and also with that, we should also should not complain about violations without enough evidence. Okay, so there should be enough evidence, and the complaint should be backed with facts as well. Again, this should not violate confidentiality. Letter H. Unfair discrimination against complainants and respondents. Number 1. We do not discriminate against complainants and respondents of ethical complaints by denying them employment, advancement, admissions to academic tenure, or promotion. Alright, so if there is a violation, we should not take that violation to decide, okay? To decide whether we are going to hire that person, admit that person, make that person or promote that person. Okay, so the violation should serve only as a violation of the person, not the person. Okay, because that's different. Because if you discriminate, you are actually pointing out the personality of the person, and that should not be done. Okay, because we professionals are not looking at the personality of the person. We are looking at the ethical conditions and general standards and how we apply it. Okay, so if there are ethical standards being violated by a person, that ethical standards would only be the one being reported, okay, not the person. Because if you are going to report the person and tell the person that he or she is not um, deserving of any employment or position in the future, that's actually unethical. All right, so that's what this number one is trying to say. So we should not discriminate. It's either the complainant or the respondents, okay, or the one being complained to. Being complained. Number two, this does not rule out taking appropriate actions based on outcomes of proceedings. Okay, so also that depends as well on the decision of the ethics committee on what would be the consequence, of course, of the uh, of the of the person who violated the the ethical standards and procedures. All right. So that's it for the first, for this part of our presentation. So we have another series of parts for this presentation. So if you have any questions, please let me know. We have our own chat box in FB. So please let me know if you have any questions. So for now, that's it. So thank you very much, and then I'll be hoping to have you again in our next presentation. Thank you. Bye for now.